So I want to run through the simplex method with an example. And here I have some setup like we did before when we first learned the geometric method, right? It's got two jobs. One pays a little bit better, 40 bucks an hour, but takes a little more prep time, 2 hours per hour. The other job pays a little worse at $30 an hour, and the prep time is a little bit lower. So I got an hour per hour of prep time. And then the total is, hey, you're going to spend 12 hours a week working, and you're going to spend at most 16 hours prepping. What's up?
With two variables, is it easier to use geometric method?
Probably. There's a lot of steps in this, and so if you can get away with the geometric method, I would advise it. But I want to have a kind of a short example to show you guys, so here we are. Cool? All right, so what was step one? I totally forgot.
Equations.
Okay, make equations the same way you did before. So there's constraint equations, right? What are your constraint equations?
Job 1 plus job 2 equals 12.
Oh yeah, I'm going to need some variables, right? I'm just going to, just for kicks, I'm going to call this one x1 hours and this one x2 hours.
Why would you do that?
Because I want to confuse the bejesus out of you.
You should do that.
It's easier for matrices.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to use y for something else though, so I don't want to use it here. Okay, so there's the first x and the second x, right? There's the x from the job 1 and x from job 2. Okay, so I think you guys are right that, let me go over here. x1 plus x2 has to be smaller than 12, right? That's my total hours worked thing. What else is there?
Each have to be bigger than 0.
Yeah, they each have to be bigger than 0. I'm not going to worry about that right now. What else?
x1 plus x2 must be smaller than or equal to 16. How would that work?
2x1 plus x2.
2x1 plus x2, right? 2 hours for every x1 hour and 1 hour for every x2 hour. Has to be smaller than 16. What the heck, let's write these down. Both have to be bigger than 0. Okay, so that's my what?
Those are your constraints.
Those are my constraints. Okay, what else?
Objective.
Yeah, there's objectives, right? So these guys are constraints. My objective equation is what?
Oh, make the most money.
Yeah, I want to profit, right? Or revenue or whatever. So profit as a function of x1 and x2 is what?
40x1 plus 30x2.
Perfect. 40x1 plus 30x2.
Can't we accidentally work over 24 hours in this model? This is a week.
Per week. It's a per week.
Gotcha.
We're working really part-time jobs. But yeah, otherwise that would be a concern, right? Okay, so once I made equations, what was I supposed to do? I forgot.
Put in slack variable.
Okay, so,
We have to change the inequalities to equalities with the slack.
Oh, that's a really good point. Okay, so what's the slack variable? So the slack variables are me saying, hey man, inequalities, those don't work in augmented matrices, right? So I'm going to force them to fit in an augmented matrix by adding some slack. So slack variables are just going to be saying how much slack is there. So I'm going to take my first equation, x1 plus x2, and I'm going to say, what do I got to do to this to get to 12? Normally, I would be saying it's less than or equal to 12, right?
Plus 12?
So, I don't know. What are x1 and x2?
Because I mean, if they are 0, which they can be, it'd be 12.
Okay, if they were 0, then it would be 12. If they weren't 0, like if they were 1 and 2, it would be...
You
Math
just
is
put
hard.
another
Math is hard.
variable.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in a variable here. I'm going to call it y1. It's just going to be the slack. So this is just how far off you are from working all the hours available in the week. You guys see that? So this is like, how much short are you of your 12 hours that you were going to work? I'm going to do the same thing for this second one. So I've got 2x1 plus x2, and that's going to be 16, right? But what do I need to add in there first?
Plus y2.
Very nice. We're just going to add y2. And so that's the amount of available prep time you're not using. You guys see that? So y1 is unused work time. And y2 is unused prep time. Do you guys remember the thing with the farmer? The example we did with the farmer? And it turned out that the best idea was to use up all of your seed money, but not all of your labor. You guys remember that? So that kind of, oh, how much labor do I have left over is what these two ideas are, right? One's work time, one's prep time, but they're kind of the surplus labor in the system. You guys cool with that? Okay, next thing's next. You gotta turn this thing into an honest equation that I can stick into a augmented matrix. Right now, this thing does not fit that form, right? Because over here, I've got some kind of response variable, right? Is some other stuff.
Would you just have it be p equals 40x1 plus 30x2?
So close. Still doesn't fit into a response, into an augmented matrix because it's not solved for a number.
You just move the function over to the other side.
Yeah, so I just kind of move this response variable that I'm going to call z to the other side.
Okay.
So I'm going to take this one and solve for 0. So that one solved for 0 is going to read minus 40x1 minus 30x2 plus z equals 0. And I know I said solve for 0, but it's actually important that you do it this way.
Yeah, you want z positive.
Z coefficient. Can't spell coefficient. Oh, God. So you want the z to have a plus sign on it. The other stuff needs negatives. Okay? All right, this was a lot of steps. Next step. What was the next step in the list? Oh, God.
Make a table.
Right? So far, I made some equations and then threw some slack in the system, did a little fiddling, and now I'm going to throw this whole business into something that looks a lot like an augmented matrix.
You don't need slack in your equals 0 functions. Are we just ignoring them?
That's our.
So why don't I need slack in the objective function? That's a good question.
Not the objective, the x equals.
Oh,
0.
in these guys?
Or are we just ignoring those?
I'm just going to ignore those. Trust me.
So basically, well, you just know that if you get an answer that one of those is negative, you know something's wrong.
Yeah. I'm going to use those kind of as I'm going through this. But yeah, let's not worry about that for right now. All right, so I'm going to make a giant augmented matrix. I'm going to go like this. x1, x2. What other variables do I have kicking around? There's y1, y2, and z. And it doesn't particularly matter which order you put this in. It will make your life easier if you put it in this order, but it doesn't really matter. And let's see. I have 0 down here, 12 and 16. Okay, so on the equation with the 12 in it, what are the leading coefficients on x1? 1. The leading coefficient on x2 is 1. And the leading coefficient on y1 is 1. And the leading coefficient on y2 is 0. And the leading coefficient on z is 0. You guys all see that? So I took my equation, I turned it into augmented matrix stuff. All right? How about the second equation? What do you get for your coefficients? 2, 1, 0, 1, 0. And then all across the bottom there, I think I've got minus 40, minus 30, 0, 0, 1, augmented by 0. You guys see how this kind of looks like an augmented matrix, but it's a little bit dorkier?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so right now, I can read off the vertex I'm sitting at. Okay? So to read off the vertex I'm sitting at, I'm looking at the bit that looks like an identity matrix and the numbers. See that? So if I look at this stuff right here, what does that stuff say to me right now?
If we say the other two are just not there.
Yeah, I'm just ignoring the other two. So this bit right now says y1 is 12, y2 is 16, and z is 0. So what does that say to you?
If you don't do anything, you don't get anything.
Perfect. If all your work time is unused, all your prep time is unused, your profit's 0. Done. You guys see that? So that's how I'm going to read off what vertex I'm at. I'm going to look for the identity matrix, and I'm going to read off the coefficients. You guys see that? Okay. Now, what step am I on? I made a table, right? And I noticed some stuff about the table.
Find the biggest payoff is the next step.
Okay, now I need to find a biggest payoff. So, let me suppress all of this stuff. So, here's the idea. Which job do you make the most money doing?
Job 1.
Job 1, right? Please note, the hours I work at job 1 are right here, yes? So, if I look down here, I'm noticing that this number is a more negative number than all the other numbers here. Okay, see that? That means that to increase z the most, I should ditch this part. Right? I should put, right, my first idea is, hey, I get paid the most at job 1, so I'm going to go do job 1 as much as I can. Okay? That's going to make z bigger. So this right here is my biggest payoff. Boom. So that's me looking at this first column and saying, okay, there's my payoff column. That's the one I want to fiddle with. That's the edge I want to go on, right? Now I need to do what? What was I supposed to do next?
Most constraining constraint.
Yeah, I need to go find the most constraining constraint. And the way you do that is you take this and divide it by that. So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to think 12 over 1 is 12. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, 16 over 2 is 8. So 8's the smaller number. So that means I'm going to use this as my pivot. You guys see that? So the smallest of these makes this row, right? The most constraining constraint. Right, your book calls these things quotients, And then they say, go find the thing that's in the kind of biggest payoff row, most constraint, or sorry, biggest payoff column and most constraining constraint row. That thing's your pivot. Cool? All right, now what the heck do you do with the pivot?
So that whole row is a pivot?
No, just this guy.
Just that
So
thing.
would you reduce row echelon with that?
Yeah, so this is going to boil down to the same way you used to solve augmented matrices. It's just that you have to kind of do this rigmarole to figure out which thing to get rid of. So what this means, right, is that I was looking at doing job 1, right? Job 1 takes 2 hours of prep per hour worked. And so I'm saying, okay, according to the first equation, right, my total work time, I could totally work all 12 hours at job 1, right? But according to my prep time constraint, I can't. The most I can do at job 1 is 8 hours because my prep time maxes out at 16. You guys see that? Okay, so I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to move from where I'm at, the 0, 0 vertex. I'm going to move to doing 8 hours of work at job 1. So the way I'm going to figure out what that looks like is I'm going to make this row 1 here, and then I'm going to 0 that guy out. Exactly the same way I would try to solve an augmented matrix, right? I'm going to try to get some zeros and a z. And I don't care about these because they're slack variables. They don't really mean much.
Don't we 0 up to?
Yeah. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to make this a 1. Okay, so making that a 1. This is make pivot 1. How the heck do I do that? Yeah, how about this? Don't overthink what you're doing to the first row. What are you going to do to the first row? Nothing. So I got 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 12. Third row. What am I going to do to the third row right now?
Nothing.
Also nothing. So I got minus 40, minus 30, 0. Whoa. Sorry, lost my column structure. Minus 40, minus 30, 0, 0, 1, 0. And then this middle row, what am I doing to that? How do I make the pivot 1?
Dividing by 2.
Yeah, I'm going to divide that middle row by 2. Right? So this is going to be divided by 2. This is nothing. That's nothing. So I'm going to get 1, 1/2, 0, 1/2, 0, 8. Cool. Now,
Now do you try to get rid of the negative 4?
yeah, so now I want to get rid of this one here, and I'm going to try to get rid of that there. Cool. So, first things first.
Subtract the middle row from the top row.
Cool. Write down minus the middle row. So minus 1, minus 1/2, minus 0, minus 1/2, minus 0, minus 8. Rewrite. Okay, so what am I doing to the bottom row? Nothing. So I got minus 40, minus 30, 0, 0, 1, 0 down there. What am I doing to the second row? Also nothing. So write the second row again. So 1, 1/2, 0, 1/2, 0, 8. Okay, now what? Top row?
0, 1/2, 1, negative 1/2, 0.
Okay, so what did I do?
What did you do or what are you doing?
What did I do?
What did you do or why did you do it?
What did I do? How did I do it? So I think this looks a lot like augmented matrix land, right?
Can't you just finagle?
Except that I'm not kind of trying to finagle for the identity, right? I'm kind of fiddling in a slightly different way.
You're making it so this constraint is always accounted for.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I divided the second constraint, right, the prep time constraint by 2. That doesn't matter, right? I didn't change anything by doing that. And then what I did was I combined the prep time constraint and the work time constraint in such a way as to only have the hours at job 2 and slacks in there. You guys see that? So this is still a constraint equation, and it's still roughly the work time constraint. But now it doesn't include the hours at job 1, it instead incorporates the slack from equation 2. You guys see that? Don't worry about it too much. Do the thing. So what happened was I combined this constraint equation and this one in a funny way. Right? There were 2 constraint equations. I just stuck them together a little bit. And what I ended up with was I removed the hours that I worked at job 1 from the top constraint. And I traded it for some use of that slack variable. Don't worry about quite how that happened. It just happened. And then here I have my second constraint, and here's my kind of profit equation, right? Okay, this minus 40 is still my biggest payoff. So what do I want to do with that?
Get rid of it?
Yeah, I want to zap that out to make my profit bigger, right? Because right now that's the biggest drag on my profit, is that I'm not working at job 1 at all. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to annihilate that thing. Okay, so how do you do that?
Times row 2 by negative 40.
Times row 2 by
40.
40.
40. So if I multiply row 2 by 40, I think I get 40, 20, 0, 20, 0, 320. Okay. So now I'm going to stick those together. So what am I doing to the top row?
Nothing.
Nothing. So I got 0, 1/2, 1, minus 1/2, 0, augmented by 4. Second row. What did I do the second row? Yeah, I want to leave that one alone. So I got 1, 1/2, 0, 1/2, 0, augmented by 8. And then underneath, what have I got? Got 0, negative 10, 0, 20, 1, 320. Okay, so now if I go through and read off my identity matrix, I can read where I am. So this looks like part of the identity, that looks like part of the identity, and so does that. You guys see that? So if I follow those across, I think I have x1 is 8.
Does x2 not matter there, or
I can't untangle x2 conveniently.
we're just going to ignore it?
So I'm going to ignore it for right now.
So
Because I just want to know where I am, right?
So are you going to ignore the columns that are not in the identity matrix?
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to suppress anything that's not just 1, 1, and the rest thereof. So right now I'm sitting at job 1 hours is 8. What does this one say? Which column is that
Slack
in?
variable 1.
That's in slack variable 1, right? That's some unworked hours. And that's 4. So I'm only working 8 hours, right? And from that I can get the job 2 hours, right? And what's this other thing say? D is 320. You guys see that that's where I am if I only work at job 1? So I went from not working at all, through all this pivot mess, Now I'm only working job 1. You guys see that? Okay, so what stage was I just at? I did pivot operations. Now where am I?
7.
7, which is
Check payoff.
check to see if there's more payoff. So what did the biggest payoff look like? That looked like a drag on my z, right? That was some negative thing on z. Have I got a negative thing in the z row? Yeah, I've got a negative 10, right? So that's my biggest payoff. You guys see that? I got my biggest payoff column now. And now what do I do? I need to figure out which row is the what? Where did I just go?
You went back to step 4.
Yeah, I had to go back to step 4, right? Because I wasn't done.
Find your most constraining constraint.
So now I need to find the most constraining constraint again. So now I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, okay, I need to take 4 and divide by a half. And I need to take 8 and divide by a half. What do you get?
8 and 16.
So that's 16. That's 8. So which of those is which one's the one I want? Top one, right? The smallest one. So there's my constraining constraint. That means that this dude right here is what? That's my pivot. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing, right? We're going to go back to the beginning.
Why did you combine before you erase it, that bottom one, the very bottom set of equations? Why did you combine the 40? Yeah.
This guy?
Yeah.
I was trying to make a 0 here to increase my z.
Yeah.
Right, so I had this kind of negative thing, that's a drag on my z equation. So I'm going to try to get rid of that. That'll increase my z. In fact, it went from z is 0, right, over here, to z is 320 over there.
So it was just the biggest negative you chose.
Yeah, I just chose which direction is going to get me money the fastest, right? Like you've got these 2 job options. First guess, I'm going to work all my hours at the best paying job. Okay, so that's what we did. That's where we're sitting now. Now we're going to say, but hey, there's 4 hours left over, right? You had this slack variable. You could work some of that at job 2 and see how it goes. Right, so we're going to go there, and then we'll see if there's another way we could make a better payoff. Okay, so from there over here, what do I need to be doing? What did I do last time? Once I identified the pivot.
You made it 1.
Good, perfect. So need to make the pivot 1. So how do I make the pivot 1? What am I going to do to that?
Multiply the top row by 2.
Perfect. Multiply the top row by 2. So I'll write a little smaller. If I multiply the top row by 2, what do I get?
0, 1,
2, negative 2, 0, 8.
I think I could get a -1 here, but otherwise I'm happy with that.
Wait, why did you multiply that by 2?
Because I wanted to make the pivot 1.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I want to see that be the identity
Yeah.
thing, right? Okay. Now, what about this second row? What am I going to do with that?
nothing.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that alone for right now. So I got 1, 1/2, 0, 1/2, 0, 8. And then in the bottom, what am I going to do with that?
Nothing.
Yeah, leave it alone. So I got 0, -10, 0, 20, 1, 320. You guys cool with this? All right, now what? After I made the pivot 1, what was my next step?
Is there out the other 2 things?
Yeah, 0 out the other 2 things. So I need to 0 out these 2 guys. So I'm going to go for that one first, but we could just do them both at the same time. You want to do them both at the same time? Let's go for one at a time. All right, so how am I going to get this 1/2 to be a 0? I need to use this. So I'm going to multiply this top row by -1/2 and add it to the middle row. So I'm going to get 0, -1/2, -1, positive 1/2, 0, and 1.
What are you doing to the second row? Did you
I'm
say?
taking the first row and I'm multiplying by -1/2.
And then adding it.
And then I'm going to add it to the second row.
You want to just do the third row at the same time?
I decided not to because people seem trepidatious.
Because you're trying to get that -10.
Yeah, ultimately here I'm trying to target the -10. But I got to do this thing first. So multiplying through by -1/2, what do I get from the 8?
-4.
-4. Okay, so now I'm going to do that little addition problem, right? And what am I doing to the top row? Nothing. So I got 0, 1, 2, -1, 0, 8. Bottom row, nothing. So I got 0, -10, 0, 20, 1, 320. And now in my middle row, what do I have?
0, 0, -1, 1.
I'm hoping for 1.
Sorry.
1 plus 0 is 1. And then
0,
0,
-1,
-1, 1,
0, -4.
0, and 4. Okay, now what? What?
Can you use non-pivot rows to zero out other rows?
Please don't.
Okay. I was wondering if you'd run into problems.
You will, because you'll be wandering around your shape at random instead of like taking the
Following.
best path. Yeah. Yeah, don't do that.
I feel like I'm doing that anyway.
Yeah, it feels like that a little bit. Identify the pivot, use that to blast everything else. If you don't identify the pivot and use that to blast everything else, like you just row reduce, you'll end up at some random vertex. God only knows which one. So let's see, now I want to get rid of the -10, right? Because that was the point, that was my payoff.
That whole pivot deal is telling us which line's the best to follow.
Exactly, yeah, it's telling you which edge is the best one to move along. So, what do I do to the top row to get rid of the bottom row?
Multiply it by 10.
Okay, so I think I get 0, 10, 20, -10, 0, and
400. Oh, sorry.
80. I'm not adding
Skip this
yet.
up, my bad.
Okay, now, first row, I'm going to leave alone. So I got 0, 1, 2, -1, 0, 8. Second row, I'm also leaving her alone. So I got 1, 0, -1, 1, 0, 4. And bottom row, I now have
0,
0,
0,
20,
20,
10,
10,
1, and
1.
400.
and 400. Okay, so now if I read off the, maybe let's check. So right now, what did I just do? I think I just did all the pivot stuff. So what step am I at again?
7 again?
Yeah, I think I got to step 7 again. Step 7 says I should check for
Payoff.
payoff. Is there anything negative in your bottom row?
No.
No, there's no drag on your jam here, so I think you can be gone. It would be good to find out what vertex I'm at. And this is the pink thing. So to find out what vertex I'm at, I want to read the identity matrix out of here, right? So here's a column of the identity matrix, which says what? What does that one tell you? These two together, how about? How about this? Which variable is this? Right here.
X1.
That's x1, right? So this is saying, roughly, x1 is 4.
At job 2. No?
Uh-uh.
No.
Okay, x1 is 4.
Based on your prep time equation.
Yeah, so that's still in the prep time equation spot, right? But I'm a lot of steps out from the prep time
It's the
equation.
very conflated.
You guys see that? Like, yeah, it started in the prep time slot, but right now what this means is that's one of the vertices, right?
Would that be x2 though? Because the column, that was the x2 column, wasn't it?
No, they go
That's in the x1 column.
Y1, Y2. Completed.
And so that would be 8.
And I think x2 is 8.
Yeah, thank you.
Convoluted, is that?
I already tried that. It's complicated.
And what's z?
400.
400.
So we've gone back to it telling us just how much we should work at each one.
Yeah, and so now I'm done, right? You guys see that? Do I know what the slacks are?
Doesn't matter. There is no slack.
And it doesn't matter.
If the slacks don't matter, why do you have them?
Because I need them in here for the technique to interpret things.
And if you
Well,
really
yeah,
want to know
you
what the slack is, you can simply plug those numbers into your constraint equation.
You're
Yeah.
both working and prepping your 12 and 16 hours. The slacks are 0.
Yeah, on this one the slacks happen to be 0, right? But if I want to find out exactly what they are, I can plug them in.
Important question, do we have to do this or can we do our other way?
So, if you're in 2-variable land, like this problem, you can do the other way. If you're in multivariable, like there are 3 drops, then you have to do this way because you can't draw the polygon.
You could try.
You can, of course, try. If there are 4 variables, 4 drops,
Yeah, you're done.
you definitely have to do it this way because you cannot draw the polygon in 3-dimensional space.
What do you say we leave this off the test?
No. I promise it's not so bad. Once you get some practice, it's not really horrible. I promise. For real.
Can we at least on the test not do something that has like 6 variables?
Yes, on the test I will keep variables to a bare minimum. And also I'll give you pieces, right? Like,
Like last time.
say you're here, tell me what the biggest payoff column is. What's the most constraining constraint equation? Point at your pivot.
Well, with this method, it doesn't really get that much confusing with more variables, does it?
No, and this method doesn't get more confusing with more variables. It's the same thing, it's just more steps,
Yeah.
right? But otherwise it's the exact same thing. You guys see that? Like, really, all I'm doing is I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm still gonna make the quotients. Instead of 2 of them, there might be 7. But I still pick the smallest one, and that's my blue row. I still pick the most negative thing across the bottom, that's still my pink row, or my pink column, right? The intersection's still the pivot, you do the same thing. I'm not gonna give you 7, but it would be the same thing. Cool? Questions, things? Okay.